We want to drive adaptation. We don't want to drive annihilation. If we drive annihilation for them, they're going to hit the wall pretty quickly.
Hey there, welcome to our podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, could you please do us a solid? If you're enjoying what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and hit that subscribe button on your platform. It really helps us reach more parents, coaches, and youth in the youth athlete development scene. All right, let's get into this week's chat.
Welcome back to the Inner Athlete Podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different, where I was invited down to the Richmond Institute to deliver a presentation on programming for young elite swimmers. And this was a bit of a different one, but hopefully you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the next one. Programming for youth elite swimmers. So I think Nathan may have alluded to that you did last term is like, what are some of the things you need to know? What's the important bits of information that we need to know first? So does anyone want to put their hands up? What are some things that we'd like to know about our athletes before we write any programs or do any testing? What was that? Previous injuries? Training history, good one.
What their goals and aspirations are.
Goals and aspirations. Anything else? Yeah. Experience, yeah. Anything specific about the sport itself? No? Okay, so and what are the type of movement patterns that they're going through? What are the what muscles are overused or underused? You know, when we look at locomotive sports like cycling, swimming, and running, we tend to have overload issues. So with swimming, shoulders, lower back, and hips are the main ones. For if you're looking at running specifically, usually it's going to be the Achilles and sometimes the hamstrings, but for footballers it'll be the hamstrings and groin. So with fitness testing, so what we want to do is we actually want to find what their baseline measures are. So for upper and lower body power and strength, now because of the environment that I have access to, or the gym space, I'm quite limited. Fortunately enough, I do have some testing equipment as well, which I know Nathan's going to go through with you guys later on down the track. And it's really important to understand what these tests and measures actually mean moving forward, and making sure you actually repeat these tests as well to actually make sure that your program that you're prescribing is actually improving these specific outcomes as well. So we got broad jump, squat jump, we do a counter movement jump. Does anyone know the difference between a squat and a counter movement? Yes, you're right. So a counter movement is a down and up, so no pause. A squat jump is where you get them to go down, hold for 3 count, and go up. So there's no stretch shortening cycle occurring with that one. So one's more about explosive, one's more about reactive strength. We usually, with swimmers, majority of clubs will use pull-ups, but because I know they do pull-ups all the time, I actually chose to do chin-ups instead, and it helps me actually clean up their technique as well. So with chin-ups, it's actually a greater range of motion. Technically, it's not the most specific of the chin-ups or of a pull-up action, but I found that it's actually been beneficial for the kids that we work with. And metabolic chest pass. So we actually want to test upper body power. We don't need to do any bench pressing or anything like that, because it's mainly for the breaststrokers, because it's that action of being able to thrust their arms forward. So this is what I mean is you need to be able to understand what are the actual movement patterns in your sport and make sure you measure that, and then you can test it over a period of time as well. And mobility, so overhead squat. You guys done overhead squat tests? Yeah, okay, cool. So overhead squat's really good because it can actually pick up a lot of issues that you can actually utilize or be able to prescribe to fix within the actual training program as well. Then I just want to show you some testing data. Whoops, go back. So there we go. So we've been testing since August, and now because of the setting that we're in, we're working with high school kids. As you can tell, we haven't done every testing period with them as well. Some tests are more important than others, but as you can tell, we've had athletes come in later on down the track. But we'll use this data. They've just finished up nationals. We'll end up testing them late this week, if not early next week. And then we can rinse and repeat the whole process to make sure they're actually tracking in the right direction as well. We do have a counter movement jump. I think it was, is it a little higher, a 51, which is actually quite good. And yeah, so it's Felix row 10. He's actually going to the Olympic trials later on this year for 100-meter breaststroke, I believe, which is quite a competitive event. So he's done really well. As I mentioned before, we need to understand a bit of a needs analysis in terms of the movement patterns as well. So with the sport, we need to understand the distances, the strokes, the skills. So it's really broken down. The skills are the turns, dives, and the time they spent underwater as well. So to understand the sport, you got to understand the different or key components and breaking it down. So with the underwater, being underwater is actually more efficient than the strokes. So just understanding that general idea, then you actually want to help to improve their underwater to be able to go up to the 15-meter mark, which is understanding the rules and the sport itself. They're now transitioning from long course into short course season now, so the rules change a little bit. And they also got to understand what meets are important coming up as well. So they'll have qualifiers for states, but then states is also the qualifiers for nationals as well. Some athletes or some swimmers will find that they need to do well at states. Some of them can actually not even bother and actually just push really hard through states with their training program and then actually taper for nationals specifically. Now, if we're looking at the individuals, what are they racing? Are they sprinter, middle, long distance, freestyle, backstroke, butterfly, breast, individual medley? What's their actual build as well? So understanding their overhead squat assessment can give you a bit of an idea of what they're going to be more biased towards as well. So for those who've got an actual narrow stance in the overhead squat, they're actually going to be better breaststrokers. It's just something that I've just found throughout testing. Training age, as we mentioned before, are they playing other sports as well? So depending, if they're younger, they might be playing other sports. Usually if they're about 15 or 16, they've usually committed full time to swimming. And their training load can vary from, I think they'll start with about 12 hours a week and then they can ramp up to about 20 hours a week. So it's pretty much a part-time job, plus they've got school on top as well. Injuries and other conditions we need to know about need to be taken into consideration for the program. And what's their fitness level? Are they quite strong, but the technique might be a bit weak? Do they need to improve their power? Do they need to improve their mobility? So a lot of questions that need to be answered throughout the assessment process and a bit of a needs analysis. What was my objective for the club specifically? Now, when I came into the club, just to give you a bit of context, they didn't really have anything structured or anything purpose-built when I came into the club. So my goal was actually improve tissue and movement quality through isometrics and tempos. And use the early phases to improve the adaptability of tissue structures, so tendons, ligaments, fascia, muscles themselves, and get the athletes to understand the intended purpose of the program as well. Is that better? Is the white noise or? Oh, good. Then we want to remove the willingness to always max out. So who likes to max out in the gym? There's always a few people. Yeah, don't do it. It's not worth it in the long run. There's times and places for it, but when working with youth elite, there's really no need to. We want to drive adaptation. We don't want to drive annihilation. If we drive annihilation for them, they're going to hit the wall pretty quickly. And we want to make sure that athletes become more self-sufficient in their training. So this is probably the biggest thing. If you're going into strength and conditioning, right, you don't want to be that babysitter. Especially working with 12 and 13-year-olds, you need to have a way in order to get them to become more self-sufficient. I don't want to be holding their hands or anything like that. In the initial stages of a new program, yes, I can understand to some degree, but there needs to be some level of self-sufficiency, especially working with junior elite. If their goal is to become elite, they're going to have to become more independent over time. All right, so let's get into the crux of the actual program. So a lot of this stuff won't make much sense, but hopefully you'll pick up something that you'll be like, all right, I can look more into this moving forward. So what we did was, it's called tissue reeducation. There was a coach in the US, Jim Schneider, who works with a lot of NHL guys, does this program in the off season specifically. So what we're doing is we're focusing on a lot of tempo-based movements. So it's a 3 down, 2 hold, 2 up, 2 hold. moderately low reps, moderate sets, and then we're doing isometric right afterwards as well. The idea is to accumulate the tissue quality. So we're improving the tissue's adaptability for later programs specifically, but also it helps to improve movement quality as well. So if you have a lot of kids that might struggle with a goblet squat and controlling themselves down, this is actually a really good program to introduce to get them to actually control and be able to hold these positions specifically. And you can do this with body weight as well, a lot of these different movements. And then usually we'll pair it up. So we usually do like a tempo goblet squat with the ISO squat hold. If you've got more advanced strong guys, so if you've got like some rugby boys or footy boys, you could do a heavy goblet squat and a lighter goblet squat hold, overcome a chest supported row, and then 2 dumbbell hold for time. And then usually you pair it up with the specific muscle group that you're working with as well. Now going to phase 1B with the tissue education is 3 weeks, eccentric emphasis. It's a 5 down, 1 hold and 1 back up. 6 reps, learning to reload. So we've gotten more comfortable in the bottom position of a lot of these movements. Now we're going to teach ourselves to load ourselves into these positions. So these are a lot of the exercises that we utilize for their programs as well. And the way that we did it, they were training, 3 days a week. So we could do like a split squat emphasis, but each session was whole body overall. Now we're going to the phase 2, so 1 by 20. Have you spoken to them about 1 by 20? Are you going to? Oh. All right, so this is the dumbest program I've ever heard of. I tried it over in the US and I became probably the most fittest ever. So if you're looking for a program where you don't have to think too much for yourselves, this is probably the program to do. Pick 15 to 20 different exercises, starting with your compound stuff and progressing to more secondary or accessory-based movements afterwards. 1 set, 20 reps, it will push you, it will build your fitness like crazy. This is the one thing that we had noticed, that a lot of our athletes not only did they build their endurance, but they also got bigger as well, especially for swimmers. Like some of the kids actually did need to get put on some size as well. And the progressive overload is actually inbuilt in the program as well. So once you've achieved your 20 reps, you're going to go up 2.5 to 5%, which is the general rule of thumb with this program as well. Then we ran this for 3 weeks. Then we changed the exercises up on them. And then we did 1 by 20 again, just more variations, a bit more specific. So as you get closer to competitions, you want to get a little bit more specific. Now this is Kaylin, he's 17, yeah. That's 80 kilo Zercher squat for 20 reps. So pretty strong boy to be able to do something like that. For those who don't know what a Zercher squat is, think of the bar and the crux of your elbows. So you're holding it across there. It's not fun, but it is a tough exercise to do. All right, then we shifted on to 1 by 15. So 1 by 15 is just progressing the intensity. We utilize the same exercises that we did in the 1 by 21. But what we had done is we microdosed strength and power at the beginning as well, because our main focus is going to be developing strength and power later on. So we just put enough of that skill component there, so for later on we can double down on that specifically as well. Still focusing on GPP, 1 set, 15 reps, 3 times a week. Progressive, like I said before, progressive overload is already inbuilt into the program. And then the same thing, 1 by 15, same exercises as 1 by 22. Now, this is the conjugate. So conjugate basically means you're working on different qualities at the same time, but you'll have one which is a greater emphasis than the other. So we did this as a 3 to 4 week training block. Now, competition started to ramp up at this point in time as well. So we're probably looking at about November, December at this point. So we split it into a 3-day split. So we did upper, lower, and whole body. So with upper body, main focus was 3 sets of 5 reps of primary compound exercises. So for example, that we did we followed up with a low load, high velocity. So what that really means is if they did a really heavy exercise, say on a trap bar deadlift, we'd actually follow it up with something that's more high velocity, low load. So we did high load, low velocity, then low load, high velocity afterwards. So there's that potentiation effect that we're looking for. So we did inverted rows with the med ball slam, trap bar deadlift into a depth jump, then a barbell bench press with a supine med ball chest pass as well. We did include secondary and accessory movements as well, just to target those specific areas, just to make sure we're not overloading specific structures, especially for a sport like swimming. We always got a lot of internal rotation, so we want to make sure we get some external rotation happening as well for them. Then we moved into more of a strength and power emphasis. So this was another 3 to 4 weeks as well. We did have to play it by ear during this time because it was over the Christmas period. Same emphasis, but what we had changed is a band resisted trap bar. So we're really teaching them a bit more of that acceleration component into the movements. Then did band resisted bench. Now, what I didn't mention previously when we did the whole body is we did more of a lighter day for them, where we'd pick 4 exercises, 8 sets of 2 to 3 reps, and did that in more of a circuit style than anything else. This was actually really good because it helped to freshen them up if they had races on the weekend, but still allowed us to keep the neural drive quite high into this program as well. Then the second last part would be the conjugate, so the power emphasis. So this is very similar movements for the whole body, but in terms of the up and lower days, we did 5 sets of 3 reps. So we want to make sure that the movements were high quality, plenty of rest in between as well, and then making sure we're actually moving with a high intent with a lot of these exercises. We did keep a lot of the secondary movements like split squats, Turkish get-ups, Swiss ball, single leg hamstring curls, a bit more specific to what they're going to be exposing themselves into in their races, and then just keeping some of the accessory movements the same as well. So just a simple rule of thumb, as you get closer to competitions, you actually want to keep the movement patterns relatively the same, but you can always change the load however you want as well. Anything new that you introduce is going to leave them quite sore. So that's why, if I go back, with the dynamic warm-up, I'm always microdosing the strength and power exercises in the beginning, so they're less likely to be sore, especially when races start to become more of a thing, leading into states and nationals as well. Then the last part is the taper. So basically 1 week, we basically just chopped everything down, 3 sets of 3 reps, kept it really simple, and then we only kept it maybe 1 to 2 sets, depending on how they were feeling as well. So at this point, there's really nothing else that you can build. You're just making sure that they're moving well, feeling confident, and throughout the whole process, we're doing some testing as well. And then in summary, this is what it really looks like. 3 distinct phases. We've got tissue re-education, isometrics, eccentrics. Phase 2 would be really your GPP block. We're spending a lot of time in there. Then phase 3, we're spending quite a bit of time developing strength and power at that point. Biggest takeaways, understand the demands of the sport. I think that's a real big thing and we can look over. So if you've got to look at, say if it's like footy, something like that, you've got to look at the specific nature of the sport, what are they doing the most of, and then you can be able to prescribe accordingly for that. Another one that I think gets discounted quite a bit is actually speaking to the sports coaches. Now, because we work in a private facility, we actually have athletes from other clubs, from other clubs as well. We try and make an effort to actually speak to the coaches, actually find out what the individual needs are that are being missed as well. And that allows us to actually better prescribe moving forward also. So talk to the athletes, talk to the coaches. You'll get a lot more information than you think. And then you can make sure you can prescribe accordingly moving forward as well. Because what you see, they might be able to see something else from their own perspective as well. Test every 6 to 8 weeks. I think it's a general rule of thumb as well. If you test too often, they'll get too caught up in the testing component. You want to make sure that they have, like every 6 to 8 weeks is enough time for that adaptation to occur of specifically what you're trying to drive. Then track loads of the program. So when I previously came into Melbourne Swimming, the biggest problem was nothing was really being tracked. Programs were getting written up on the whiteboard. Athletes were expected to follow it, and you can kind of get a bit of an idea. So you have a half-assed program, getting half-assed results. When you actually track something over a period of time, you can actually find out what the gaps are. And then because we're heading into short course season, we're literally going to rinse and repeat this to some degree, making minor adjustments because the actual demands will change as well. Because swimming from a 50 meter to a 25 meter, the demands will change up slightly. So there's a lot more turns involved. So we have to take that into consideration moving forward.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.